Let's start with a decision that's been months in the making. On Tuesday, former Governor General David Johnston is expected to announce whether a public inquiry into foreign election interference is needed. Back in March, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau appointed Johnston to the role of independent special rapporteur in response to a barrage of CSIS intelligence leaks alleging the issue of Chinese interference was not being taken seriously. And since then, concerns have really only grown. Earlier this month, the Chinese diplomat was kicked out of Canada for attempting to intimidate Tory MP Michael Chong and his family back in 2021. Those revelations, first reported by the Globe and Mail, have intensified questions over how intelligence is shared with the Prime Minister after he admitted to only learning about that specific threat from the media. CSIS has also started to contact more MPs to brief them on being targeted. Meanwhile, party leaders have met with Mr. Johnston ahead of his decision, except for opposition leader Pierre Poilievre.
He is Justin Trudeau's ski buddy, his cottage neighbor, his family friend, and a member of the Trudeau Foundation, which got $140,000 from Beijing. He has a fake job, and he's unable to do it impartially.
With me today, the minister who oversees democratic institutions, Dominic LeBlanc. Hi, Minister. Good to welcome you back to the program.
Good morning, Vashi.
Thank you so much for making the time. Given all that's come to light this year, and in particular the fact that the Prime Minister didn't even know Michael Chong was being targeted, is there a world in which you can see your government pursuing anything other than a public inquiry into foreign interference?
So obviously we've said that it was unacceptable that the minister responsible at the time, the Prime Minister, weren't made aware. That is a failing of an information flow in the government. We've corrected that. Weren't aware of the situation around Mr. Chong. David Johnston is going to early next week make public his advice with respect to a public inquiry, some form of review. We obviously don't know what Mr. Johnston is going to suggest. We've committed to following the advice of Mr. Johnston. So in a couple of days when we see his advice, he spent a lot of time reviewing a lot of the intelligence. He's met with many of the officials, if not all of the officials that run the different intelligence agencies. He's met with a number of my cabinet colleagues. I met with him. He's met with some opposition leaders. So I think Vashi will know a lot more in the next couple of days when we see the direction that Mr. Johnston advises. That's the process we set up, and we're going to follow that.
What was your message to him when you met with him?
He had a lot of questions around how information was shared between different ministers, me as minister responsible for democratic institutions. He talked to me about some of the Elections Act changes that our government had made around foreign funding of campaigns. We talked about the chief electoral officer's recommendations that we're going to put into legislation, we hope, in the fall around strengthening some aspects in the electoral legislation. So that was the nature of the conversation.
When the leader of the Conservatives was asked why he didn't meet with Mr. Johnston, he cited essentially what boiled down to optics, right? The fact that Mr. Johnston was a member of the Trudeau Foundation, that he's a close and personal friend, as both he and the Prime Minister have admitted, of the Prime Minister. I've interviewed Mr. Johnston a number of times. He's got a great record. He's a good individual. I think, I don't want to disparage him personally in any way. But can you understand how the optics of his selection could potentially mute the impact of the decision that he releases on Tuesday and sort of lessen the weight with which that decision is carried?
I would hope not, Vashi. I think it's been unseemly the way the Conservatives have attacked Mr. Johnston personally. This is somebody who's never played a partisan role whatsoever. So it's convenient for Mr. Poilievre to destroy institutions, to damage reputations. He does that regularly. He can be accountable for that. We think that the vast majority of Canadians understand Mr. Johnston's integrity, his service to the country. This is a senior statesman in public affairs and public service and the law. And he'll be judged by the report that he releases on Tuesday. I don't think we should be unduly agitated by Mr. Poilievre's negativity.
But that's sort of why I'm asking, right? Because your government has placed all the weight into whatever Mr. Johnston decides on Tuesday. And now it's a situation where it already looks like no matter what he says, opposition parties, not just the Conservatives, but others, are going to call into question the veracity of that, in part because of the optics of his appointment. I'm not doubting his integrity, but the very fact that he is a personal friend of the Prime Minister and he will be tasked with deciding whether the Prime Minister should hold an inquiry that could possibly paint him in a bad light, is there not something inherently, that might not sit well with some Canadians? Is it not understandable that it might not?
Well, what's understandable for me, Vashi, is that opposition parties will find reasons to criticize the government. They don't all have to be fair or reasonable or legitimate, or in Mr. Poilievre's case, attached to the truth. So they can be responsible for their own pronouncements. We stand by Mr. Johnston's record of non-partisan service to Canada in senior roles, including Governor General, as appointed by Mr. Poilievre's former boss, Stephen Harper. And Canadians will judge Mr. Johnston by the report that he brings out on Tuesday. We don't know what's in it. Invite me back next Sunday and we can talk about the report, and maybe we'll have some greater clarity on the work that he's done.
Okay, I just want to circle back before I let you go to something you said off the top, and that is that there's kind of a fix in place to the fact that there were some big information gaps in relaying the fact that Michael Chong was targeted by a Chinese diplomat here in Canada, and the fact that it never basically made it to the Prime Minister's desk, even though that information was available back in 2021. Since that directive issued this week that basically spells out that MPs should be made aware when they are threatened, do you feel that your government has a grasp on the scope of the issue? And by that I mean, do you feel you know how many MPs were targeted by Chinese diplomats and how many Chinese diplomats are implicated in that?
Well, obviously, Vashi, and that's an understandable question, but answering that question gets into the sensitive details of intelligence information or intelligence investigations. It's not politicians that direct law enforcement agencies in their investigations. And we're not allowed by law to discuss what we learn in the briefings that we get regularly by intelligence agencies. So I think what's important is that the Prime Minister made clear, and Mr. Mendicino in his directive, that parliamentarians that have been, it also includes senators, that have been the subject of potential targeting by these hostile foreign actors will receive briefings by the appropriate officials. And it's something that, frankly, we regretted hadn't been done when the situation around Mr. Chong came to light. So we've corrected it, and the correction is being implemented as we last week and next week, and as we sit here this morning.
But Minister, I'm not asking you to disclose national security secrets here. What I'm asking you to do is to convince or reassure Canadians, rather, that your government, which wasn't even aware that Michael Chong was being targeted, is now aware of the scope of the problem and is aware of the degree to which Chinese diplomats are implicated. Can you reassure Canadians that that is the fact, or is it not?
Yeah, no, Vashi, that is very much the fact. I was in meetings last week in Ottawa. My colleague, the Minister of Public Safety. Canadians need to know that the government is aware of the extent of these activities and the measures appropriate both to protect democratic institutions and the electoral system are in place. And in the case of parliamentarians specifically, they will, of course, receive the appropriate briefings from the appropriate officials at CSIS. That work is being done. I'm very confident that any gaps that existed a year or two ago have been entirely filled, and the situation is very, very much where it needs to be.
Minister, I'll leave it there. Thanks for your time, as always.
Have a great day, Vashi. Thank you.